Number 7. Clauvino de Silva. In 2019, the leader of a drug trafficking gang put on a wig and a creepy rubber mask while trying to escape a prison in Rio de Janeiro, dressed like his 19-year-old daughter. Clauvino de Silva was caught before making it out of the facility. According to prison officials, the man's awkwardness and demeanor really gave him away as he tried to simply walk out of the main entrance. Apparently, the criminal planned to leave his daughter inside the jail while he escaped. Police were then called to investigate De Silva's daughter's role as an accomplice. As he tried to walk out, De Silva wore a silicone mask, a long dark wig, tight skinny jeans, and a pink t-shirt with donuts. A video was taken of the man by prison staff showing him removing his mask and clothes, revealing his true identity. Authorities have stated that he is a leader of the Red Command, a powerful criminal group in Brazil that controls drug trafficking for a large section of Rio de Janeiro. After De Silva's failed escape, he was transferred to a maximum security prison to face disciplinary sanctions. He was then placed in isolation at the new facility, but just 3 days later, he was found dead in his cell. Officials said he passed away from a suicide attempt. At the time of his death, he was serving a 73-year sentence for drug trafficking charges. De Silva was only 42 years old when he passed away. Number 6. Susan LeFevre. Marie Walsh seemed to live the American dream in San Diego with her perfect husband and 3 children, but she was hiding a deep secret that quickly caught up with her in April 2008. Marie's real name was Susan LeFevre, and in 1975, she was 19 years old when she was arrested for selling 2.5 grams of heroin to an undercover Michigan state trooper. After pleading guilty, she was sentenced to 10 to 20 years behind bars. But after only a year, Susan's grandfather helped her break out of prison. With only a toothbrush, clothes, and $200 in cash, Susan fled to California and started a new life. After 8 years on the run, Susan, under the alias Marie Walsh, met a man named Alan, who she'd later marry. Over the course of their marriage, she never told anyone who she really was. But in 2008, federal agents showed up at Marie's home while she was planting flowers in her garden. The agents had 19-year-old Susan LeFevre's mugshot with them, and she was arrested on the spot in her front yard. Because Marie had been a law-abiding citizen since she'd escaped in 1976, the judge gave her mercy with only 2 years of probation, leaving the drug charge up to the Michigan Parole Board. Surprisingly, they voted to set her free, claiming that she'd lived a crime-free life after leaving prison. Number 5. El Chapo. El Chapo, the infamous drug lord, escaped from prison successfully more than once in 2001, and then again in 2015. El Chapo's legal name is Joaquin Guzman Loera, and he broke out of prison in 2015 by climbing through a hatch in the shower that led straight into a mile-long underground tunnel. But he didn't do it alone. According to retired FBI agent Arturo Fontes, who spent over a decade investigating El Chapo, the drug lord had help escaping from multiple sources, both outside and inside the prison. The criminal was the leader of the Mexican Sinaloa cartel, where he gained power through murders and wars with rival groups. His first escape from prison was in 2001, when he hid inside a laundry basket with the help of prison officials he'd bribed. His second escape was 14 years later when he fled through the secret tunnel to safety. Based on his history, El Chapo was transferred to Colorado's Supermax prison to serve the rest of his life sentence there. While it's unlikely that El Chapo will escape again, nothing is impossible. No inmate has ever successfully managed to break out of Supermax before, though. These days, the drug lord is trying to have his sentence vacated, but there's little to no chance of that actually happening. If one of your good friends was sent to prison and you knew they were innocent, would you do everything to break them out? Or would you trust that the legal system would fix the mistake eventually? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 4. Pascal PAYET. A convicted killer named Pascal PAYET gained fame in 2001 when he kicked off a series of daring prison escapes using hijacked helicopters. In more than one instance, just like El Chapo, PAYET escaped from prison. He first broke out of a facility in the French village of Luynes on October 12, 2001. He was picked up by a few friends who hijacked a helicopter to help him escape. Then, 2 years later on April 14, 2003, PAYET planned another escape from Lewin prison with another helicopter. 3 of his pals, Michel Valero, Eric Albareo, and Frank Perletto, had been arrested with him in 1999 for attempting to rob an armored car, resulting in the death of a guard. So PAYET broke them out too, only for all 4 of them to be caught 3 weeks later by authorities. In early 2005, PAYET was sentenced to 30 years behind bars for murder in connection to the armored car hijacking, and in 2007, he was given an extra 7 years for confessing to organizing the 2003 prison escape. On top of that, he was handed an additional 6 years for his own jailbreak in 2001. By July 2007, PAYET was one of the most meticulously watched prisoners in all of France, and he was never held at the same facility for more than 6 months at a time. Because of his wild history, he was placed in solitary confinement. But despite all these measures, PAYET escaped one more time on July 14, 2007, the National Day of France or Bastille Day. PAYET's 4 accomplices all wore masks and took advantage of the celebrations going on that day. They hijacked another helicopter from the nearby Cannes Mandelieu airport and busted PAYET out of solitary confinement. The men all fled the scene and the original aircraft's pilot was unharmed by the criminals. But less than 3 months later, PAYET was captured north of Barcelona, Spain. He hasn't been able to escape since. Number 3. Alfred Houdini HINDS. Alfred George HINDS will forever be remembered as one of the most notorious prison break artists of all time. During his life, he managed to escape from 3 heavily guarded facilities, all in an attempt to prove to the British legal system that he was actually innocent. He spent a big portion of his life fighting charges with his remarkable knowledge of the law, and he eventually won the case for libel against him after 13 unsuccessful appeals. HINDS was born in 1917 in London. He spent his childhood as an orphan, living in a children's home where he was severely punished after his early thieving attempts. When he was 7 years old, he escaped the home and continued his life of crime until being arrested for petty theft. He was shipped off to the Borstal Institution for Teenage Delinquents, but didn't stay there long. For the second time, he escaped, and he found himself enlisting in the British Army during World War II. The Army didn't really suit HINDS though, and he quickly went right back to his illegal activities. He was arrested in 1953 for jewelry theft and sentenced to 12 years behind bars. But he managed to open a locked door 2 years later and climbed a 20-foot prison wall to escape. This impressive accomplishment earned him the infamous nickname Houdini HINDS. He was on the run for 248 days before finally getting arrested by Scotland Yard in 1956. He was sent to prison once again, but HINDS filed a complaint against the 2 officers that arrested him. During one of HINDS' hearings, he somehow got hold of a padlock and he used it to lock his 2 prison escorts up in the bathroom. Then, he left the courthouse on foot, only to be picked up and arrested 5 hours later at the London airport. After being held at the Chelmsford prison for only a year, he escaped yet again and managed to stay free for 2 full years. Number 2. YOSHIE SHIRATORI. Alfred George HINDS isn't the only prison break artist. YOSHIE SHIRATORI is considered Japan's very own Harry Houdini. It's said that not even a dislocated shoulder or copper walls could stop Shiratori's daring escape methods. The Meiji era in Japan from 1868 to 1912 was one of the harshest periods for prisoners in the country, making attempted escapes much more common. In fact, in 1881, almost 2,000 convicts made successful getaways from incarceration. The terrible prison conditions of the time were to blame for these increases in escapes. YOSHIE SHIRATORI happened to be a criminal during this period, and he's known as the man that no prison could hold. Shiratori was initially accused of robbery and murder, so he was shipped off to the Amori prison. Just 3 years later, he picked his handcuffs lock with a short wire he'd found in a wooden bathing bucket. Shiratori was only free for a few days before being apprehended again. He was given a life sentence for trying to escape and for allegedly stealing supplies from a hospital. Then, in 1942, he was transferred to Akita prison, but he managed to escape from the new facility by climbing up the impossibly smooth walls of his jail cell to reach the air vent. He climbed the walls every night until he was finally able to unhinge the vent and free himself. For some strange reason, once he was out of the facility, Shiratori went to the home of a police officer, the only man that showed him any kindness when he was at the Amori prison. Of course, the officer soon turned Shiratori in, Because of this, the prisoner vowed to never trust another police officer again. This time, Shiratori was transferred to the Abashiri prison, a penal colony reserved for the worst criminals in all of Japan. He was sent there since he'd already escaped incarceration twice, and the police wanted to make sure he stayed put this time. But Abashiri was no match for Japan's Harry Houdini, who corroded his cell's doorframe by spitting miso soup on it every morning. Over time, the moisture and salts from the soup weakened the frame, and during the wartime blackout on August 26, 1944, Shiratori dislocated his shoulders and squeezed through the small space in the door guards used to slide him food. Shiratori escaped one last time after being sentenced to death. He was held at the Sapporo prison and was under 24-hour surveillance. He made his final bid for freedom in 1947, when he unlocked the bolts that held his cell's wooden floorboards together. He then used a bowl to dig his way out. After a year on the run, he was offered a cigarette by a police officer, and this moved Shiratori so much emotionally that he confessed to being an escaped convict. He turned himself back in, and because he never performed bodily harm on any of the guards during his escapes, his death penalty was revoked. Instead, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which he served in a Tokyo facility. Shiratori was given parole in 1961, and he passed away from a heart attack later in 1979. Number 1. ASSATA SHAKUR. ASSATA SHAKUR is one of the most famous female prison escapees of all time. She was an activist, the step-aunt of music legend Tupac, and she was a member of the Black Liberation Army. She escaped prison in 1979 and fled to Cuba, where she still lives to this day. On May 2, 1973, ASSATA and 2 other members of the BLA were pulled over in New Jersey by some state troopers. Things quickly escalated, and the 2 parties engaged in a shootout, resulting in the death of State Trooper Werner Forster and 1 BLA member. Authorities accused ASSATA of being responsible for Forster's death, but she denied the allegations. She was later convicted on 6 assault charges and 1 murder charge in 1977, and subsequently sentenced to life. But evidence was later revealed, suggesting that the trial wasn't fair, and ASSATA's lawyer even called it a legal lynching and kangaroo court. With help from the BLA, ASSATA managed to escape from her prison cell in 1979. After gaining freedom, she went to Cuba and gained political asylum, even though the FBI had classified her as a domestic terrorist, and were offering a $1 million USD reward for assistance in her return and capture. She was added to the FBI's most wanted terrorist list in 2013, but to this day, she's living her life peacefully as a fugitive in Cuba. Which of these prison escape stories surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger. Bye!